that, I'd like to briefly introduce our guest today. Gail Miller is the owner of Larry H. Miller Group of Companies, which she and her late husband Larry started in 1979. Over the last decade, Larry H. Miller Group has grown to include more than 60 car dealerships, the Utah Jazz, the Salt Lake Stars, the Salt Lake Bees, theater complexes, and a variety of other companies. Ms. Miller is also actively involved in the community, serving as chair of the Intermountain Healthcare Board of Trustees, on the Zions Bank Advisory Board, and the Shelter the Homeless Board. She is also known for her legacy of giving to the community and towards education, including support to our very own Huntsman Hall and entrepreneurship program. Please join me in welcoming with gratitude, Gail Miller.
Thank you, Cam. And I think most of you know me, but I'm Doug Anderson. I'm the Dean of the Huntsman School of Business, and it's great to see you all here today. And it's so wonderful, Gail, to welcome you. And also with us today is Gail's husband, Kim Wilson. Would you mind standing up, Kim, so everybody can see you? Welcome to Kim. And we also have a very special guest, Clark Whitworth. Clark, would you stand up? Please. You know, Clark is the CEO of the Miller Companies and is a member of our university's Board of Trustees and our Huntsman School National Advisory Board. So thanks to both of you for coming, and thanks all of you, all three of you, for being such great friends of the Huntsman School of Business. As Cam mentioned, Gail wears many hats. She's a wife, a mother, a chairman of one of the largest privately owned companies in the western United States. She's an author, an involved citizen. I have the honor of serving with her on the Kim C. Gardner Policy Institute board, of which she is the co-chairman, and she has so many honors, they're too numerous to mention. But we've invited Gail today to talk to us a little bit about the book that she's recently published. It's entitled The Courage to Be You, Lessons from an Unexpected Journey, and I highly recommend it. I've enjoyed reading it myself. I've passed it around to my family members. And Gail would like to take some questions from that book, because you do really reflect about what for you was an unexpected journey. Can you just tell us a little bit about that unexpected journey? Why was it so unexpected?
When I refer to the unexpected journey, it's the last 10 years of my life, because before that I spent 44 years mothering. I was a mother to 5 children, then I raised a grandchild, and by the time my first was born and the last was out of the home, that was 44 years, and I had not worked outside of the home for that amount of time. So I had not foreseen any other kind of a journey. I thought I would raise my children, be a grandmother, a great-grandmother, be involved in all the things my family did. And after Larry passed away, then there was a whole new world that opened up to me. Everyone was out of the house except the grandson. He soon got married. That allowed me the freedom to explore other things that I had never had a chance to do.
Well, that certainly would have been an unexpected journey. I'm guessing that part of that journey was unexpected for Larry as well, though, wasn't it? I mean, did you have any idea when you started out with Larry that you would be the owners of such a magnificent corporation?
You know, absolutely not. We did not plan this journey or this, what is called by some, this empire that we now are stewards over. Yeah. We thought we would have one dealership. It would be our livelihood. We would be able to raise our family, have security, and that would be it. Yeah. But as things moved along, opportunity came one after another until we found ourselves doing things that were way beyond our imagination.
Yeah. The other part of the title, and this is the main title, is The Courage to Be You. And I wondered what exactly the courage to be you means to you.
I think for me, courage to be you means to be able to step into that space that you didn't expect to be in and embrace it, do the best you can with it. I reflect back to a time that my mother, after my father passed away, he was 56, And she had never gone to college, never worked outside the home, never drove a car. But my younger sister said to her, "Mom, why don't you come and go to college with me?" She graduated at 61 and became a registered nurse. And to me, that took a lot of courage because she hadn't been in school she was 16 when she graduated from high school. And raising a family, going on, the courage to believe in herself to the point where she could do that and fulfill a lifelong dream and work for 10 years as a nurse, to me was quite a story and impactful in my life, that we should not fear anything. Anything that comes before us, we should take the courage to step into that space and use the talents that we have and the ability and the opportunity to develop who we are and what we can become.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about your parents, and since you mentioned them, let's dig into that just a little bit. Where do you think your father was also a great provider in the sense that he worked really hard? You never had a lot growing up,
Right.
But he was tremendously innovative. I remember the story about the barber chair, for example, that you were able to turn into kind of a merry-go-round in the back where he was able to. And your mother essentially repurposing clothes and creating new clothes out of older clothes. Where do you think their courage came from?
Oh, I'm sure it came from their heritage. They had parents who came across the ocean to change their whole life to live in a new country. That takes a lot of courage. I think with my family, the circumstances which they found themselves in early, marrying just before the Depression, having 5 children during the Great Depression, having to make do with what they had because there was so little available to them, gave them opportunity to be creative and to do things that they otherwise may not have learned to do, which then passed on to me and my generation. You're right, we had very little. My father left school at age probably 14. He had an 8th grade education, but he was well educated in that he read. He was consuming everything he could all the time. And his father passed on his old world tradition of being a harness maker, shoemaker to him. So that was his trade, but he wanted something better. He always looked for something better and was never able to step out of that oppression that came from the Depression.
Yeah. You grew up in the Marmalade District, didn't you?
I did.
We were talking just briefly a little bit about our pioneer heritage before we started, and my great-great-great-grandfather, James Hendricks, lived in that area as well. Yeah, he ran the hot springs that were right down at the base of the
I went there
Marmalade.
many times.
Yeah. Why do you think courage, that quality, is so important today, and is it especially important for students here at Utah State University? Can you help us understand that a little bit?
I think courage is the foundation of all qualities. You can be kind, you can be generous, you can be loving, you can be curious, but unless you have the courage to step beyond that, those don't have the power that they otherwise could have. So courage to me is a foundational quality.
Yeah. You say in your book that you developed an ability to look at problems, evaluate them, and ask if there were a better way, and then find it. Frankly, when I read that passage, I thought this is the essence of leadership. That's what we're all about in this school, is trying to help people see problems and solve it, and see opportunities and take advantage of it. But I'm just wondering, you said that you learned that principle from your mother. And what would be an example, as you were growing up, that you can think of? Clearly, her going back to college was one, as an example of that.
That was later. I think as I was growing up, the way we lived was very humble. And one of the things that I remember most is my mother being able to teach us how to sew. I had 2 sisters, one older, one younger, and 5 brothers. Of course, some of the boys learned to sew too, but my sisters and I learned how to make patterns out of newspaper because we couldn't afford to go to the store and buy a pattern.
Right.
But my mother taught us that this is how you measure, this is how you put it together, this is how you would cut it to make it work. And it worked fine. And that way we could design our own clothing.
Yeah.
And that became a dream of mine. I used to say I want to be a housewife designer, which meant I want to design clothes, but I want to stay home and do it.
Yeah. Can you think of a problem that you've been recently struggling with or that you've resolved that might illustrate this point that you have to look at the world the way it is before you can think about how you might make it differently?
I can think of a really important one, and that is after Larry passed away, our company was financially secure because we had spent many years putting all of our extra resources back into the company to make sure we had the foundation that was needed. So he had all of his estate planning done, he had all of that work prepared, and no worries about whether the company would continue. What he didn't have time to do, and I believe he would have had he lived longer, he would have created a board of directors. So to me, looking at the situation and determining that if Larry wanted this company to last 80 to 100 years, I've got to figure out how it's going to do that. He wanted it, but he didn't set up the mechanism. So for me to look at that landscape and say, how would this work? How am I going to get from here to there when I'm not even going to be here? So I decided that setting up a board of directors with independent directors from across the country that would bring their expertise and their knowledge to help us learn what we needed to do to create that platform was what I could be best engaged in. So not knowing much about it, I hired an ex-employee who had been the president of our sports and entertainment department and retired, who had been a longtime friend and an attorney. And I thought, if anybody knows, in fact, Larry had said, if you ever need help, call Denny. So I hired Denny Haslam, to come and be my mentor and help me learn the steps I needed to go through to do the things that I thought were important to accomplish before I'm gone. So it's a logical, in my mind, it's a logical way to look at things, and that's the way life is to me. It's very logical. If you do this, and this follows, and that needs to be done. And so along with that, then I decided that I needed to be able to create something for my family to be ready for those next steps. So I've created not only a corporate governance, but a family governance. So I've created a family office, and we're learning how to be a family business. And we now have 4 generations. I have great-grandchildren, and the oldest one is about 10. So it's not going to be long before he will be working in the company. So there has to be a way for all of that to unfold.
Now, Larry's been gone for about 10 years now?
Just about. About
10 years. I would say by any objective measure, the last 10 years have been a remarkable period in the Larry H. Miller companies. Just give us some sense of how the company has grown over that period of time.
Well, I may have to refer to Clark, but I'm pretty sure it's doubled.
Yeah, that's my impression too.
Not only in employees, but in business. Is that right?
Is that right, Clark? Yeah, more than doubled. And to think that, you went from, as you said, this focus on being a wife and a mother and a grandmother, and now over that period making that transition, that is really, truly astonishing. Talk a little bit about some of the key steps along the way. You had this mentor, this friend, this colleague that could advise you, but I think you've done some other things. As I recall, you took the family and some of your key employees back to Harvard Business School, didn't you? Took a seminar?
That's true. There was a class called Families in Business that Harvard put on, and one of my sons came to me and said, "Mom, look at this. Do you think this would help us? So I investigated it, and we decided that I would take the family, myself and the second generation and some of our key people, and take that week-long class and learn if what we were doing and wanted to do was the right thing. And for me, it was great because it validated everything I thought I needed to do, because they said, this is what you need to do. And it was invaluable. And then just recently, this year, about a month ago, we invited Harvard to come and do the class for the rest of the family, and some of our business families in Salt Lake, and our management team. Great experience.
One of the other things that's happened is there's been quite a transition in terms of moving from essentially a family-run business to a professionally run business.
Well, we're not really professionally run. That's a little different nuance than what I've done, because we now are still a family-run business in the way it's set up. We have what we call a board of managers who are the family owners. Then we have the board of directors, and then we have our CEO, who is not a family member. In fact, Clark is our first non-family CEO. But in our bylaws, we've determined that either the chair of the board or the CEO must be a family member. They can both be, but they can't both be non-family.
Okay.
So we haven't hired a professional to run our company. We've only created the board to advise us.
Okay. These kind of changes, and they're massive, couldn't possibly have happened without your being willing to accept counsel, accept advice, listen. Can you talk a little bit about those qualities? Because I think that's a quality that we don't often think about with, big important CEOs or chairmen. You're the chairwoman of the board. We usually have this sort of image that they're the guys that have all the answers. You didn't have all the answers. You had a lot of questions.
Right. Well, I think that's a really important element in business, is to understand you don't have to know everything. You can have a team around you that knows everything and glean from them the things you need to know if you have a vision.
Yeah.
And that's the important part. Larry had a vision, and I think I've learned a lot from Larry over the years. I watched him, I worked with him, I listened to him, I'd go with him when he would speak, I would visit businesses with him. So he mentored me, even though I was a stay-at-home mom.
You were a partner in a real sense with Larry.
I was actually a legal partner.
Yeah.
Everything was legally done in both of our names.
Yeah.
So yes, I was a partner, and he included me and often said, I can't do what I do without you. So I appreciated that. I never believed it, but I appreciated it. I think the things I learned from him gave me the courage to step into that. And I didn't have to go right into it, because he had put Greg, our oldest son, in as CEO just before he passed away, actually about a year before. And not knowing that he was going to pass away, he was ready to turn the reins over to Greg. And so Greg served in that capacity for a number of years before I had to step in and do the things that I've done. But I was recounting yesterday some of the major milestones in our company, and we talk about the first dealership. That was a major milestone. Then we talk about buying the Jazz, building the arena. And then for me, other major milestones are creating a board and putting the Jazz in a trust. And, so I feel like I'm carrying on that tradition the way it should be done, and I hope with Larry's blessing.
I want to ask you about that point about putting the Jazz in a trust, but I don't want to get off of this idea of the partnership between you and Larry quite yet. You've talked in your book about how Larry would come home after a really long day, but he'd soak in the tub, and you'd sit there and he'd download, essentially.
Or in the bed at night.
Or in the bed at night.
Until I'd fall asleep.
But he was sort of briefing you on the business affairs. And
he was doing that, but what he was really doing was recounting in his own mind his plans and passing them out for me to evaluate and give him input. So it was a way that he could review in his own mind whether what he was doing was right or not. Sometimes you have to talk it out to see what it's really like. And so he would do that with me, and it gave me the advantage of knowing how he thought, what he was thinking about, and what the next step was very valuable. So I would encourage anybody who goes in business to remember who your first partner is and share with your partner whatever you're going through, because it shouldn't be a secret.
Just a couple of other things on the partnership between a husband and a wife, especially as it relates to creating a life together. You note in the book, and I think anybody that's been married learns this pretty quickly, that men and women communicate in a very different way.
They think they're communicating.
They think they're communicating. But you had the example in your book about a wife who says, "Boy, that garbage smells, doesn't it?" And then getting frustrated that her husband hasn't taken the garbage out, and then expresses, why don't you take the garbage? Well, you never asked me to take the garbage out. How did you and Larry overcome that sort of difference in communication styles?
Well, to be blunt, we went to therapy.
Probably a good idea.
We did a lot of therapy. I mean, for the first part of our lives together, he was working all the time. And we had very, except for a business communication, we had very little common activity. I raised the kids, I did the housework, I made the repairs, I did all of that, and Larry built the business, which worked out fine for us. We didn't complain about it. But then when it came time to go on to the other things, like we got to a point where now we were able to do philanthropic things because we had secured the business, we had extra money, and we had things we really had to decide on. And then our kids got older, and they had bigger problems, and we needed to talk about them. And in fact, I started going to therapy because I had a child who needed it. And when I got there, the therapist said, "I'm happy to help your child, but you're the one that needs it." Not meaning that I was broken, but that I needed that kind of help to get through the things I was dealing with. So I did that, and then it came time that Larry needed to come. And so doing that helped us learn how to have a common ground to communicate with. I mean, we were never perfect at it. There's always difficulty in communication, but we tried hard, and we realized that in the end, the things that were really important were the eternal things.
One of the reasons I love this book is because you are so transparent, and you are so honest and so straightforward in discussing the challenges that you've had in your life. One of the things you mentioned is that both you and Larry at different times considered divorce. You say you were lucky that neither one of you were thinking of it at the same time.
That's
I mean,
true.
you weren't both thinking of it at the same time.
Right.
But out of that, one of the lessons that I think you have taken is the importance of being, as a person, both vulnerable and open. And again, one of the reasons I love having you here with us, Gail, to talk about these leadership lessons is because I don't often have executives saying how important it is to be vulnerable and open. Would you say a little more about that?
Well, I don't think you can really learn until you're vulnerable. If you open yourself up to an idea that you can learn something, but that you may be hurt in the process, or you may be exposed for your weaknesses, that's when you're vulnerable. But that's when you learn the most, because you just have an ability to receive if you're vulnerable. And it sounds contradictory, but being vulnerable doesn't mean you're laying yourself out there and letting someone trample on you. It means you're in control of what you'll let in. And you can't really go beyond that without allowing yourself to let someone else in and give you advice or give you help. You don't need to know everything. You can be that person that needs help, And I needed help a lot of times in my life, and if I hadn't gone after it, I would be a very different person. I'd be a divorcee probably, but I realized that I had already put a lot of years into a marriage, a relationship that had produced 5 children. Why would I destroy that?
Yeah.
And that's being vulnerable to a situation that if I'd have been selfish, would have been very different.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question that might come as a bit of a surprise to you, because it's not directly in your book, but one obvious path that you could have followed following Larry's death was to have become very non-vulnerable. You know, I mean, here you are, one of the wealthiest women in the country, certainly, you know, in the Western United States. And you could have become pretty defensive about that. You could have said, well, I want to be careful that, you know, I don't open myself up to influences that are, you know, not honest and so forth. But instead, you opened yourself up to Kim Wilson.
I did.
So talk a little bit about that. That's being pretty vulnerable and open.
It is. I want to go back first to the choices I had when Larry passed away.
Please.
I mean, you're right. I could have said, I've had a good run.
Yeah.
I don't need this company. I can sell it. I can be wealthy for the rest of my life. But I thought about what we'd done together and the legacy that we had created and how important it was in providing jobs for all those people and opportunity for the community to attend a jazz game, to go to the theaters, to go to the racetrack. And I decided that it was more important for me to continue the path that we had been on than to fold up shop and say, no, I've had it. I just want to live for me. And the same thing kind of happened with Kim. We had lived in the same ward for 15 years as families, he with his wife, me with my husband. We knew each other's families. And we had, you know, we had gone through the illnesses of our spouses together. And Kim, Larry died in 2009. Kim's wife died in 2011, so about a year and a half after Larry. And we had a lot of things in common that we really didn't know, because our relationship had been as I was Relief Society president. He burned his house down twice.
Nice going, Kim.
So I got to serve his family. I knew his children. And we had that working relationship, and I thought, he is really a type A personality. He didn't want help. So there was a challenge there. But after his wife died, he realized that we had a lot of common touch points. I was involved in the Joseph Smith Papers Project. He founded the Mormon Historic Sites Foundation. Those two groups of people interact quite a bit. The things that we were both very involved in, emergency preparedness. In fact, that's how we announced our engagement. Was in Sunday school. He got up and said, I need just a minute for, what did you call it?
It's a Relief Society thing.
I know.
Something minute.
It's something minute. Anyway, they don't do it anymore. But he said, Gail and I have been talking, and we've decided to combine our food storage. So anyway, he started calling me and asking me out, and I thought, I don't need to get married again. I'm set financially. I have a nice home. I've got a family, and
I don't need the other problems.
Yeah, and I said to him, why would I get married again? And he said, well, what about companionship? Well, he had me there. That's one of the really good reasons to get married, besides love. And we have developed a very nice love relationship.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that very much. Let's go back to the jazz if we could.
Okay.
Putting the jazz in a trust is a huge thing. It's very unusual that you've done that. What's the market value of the jazz now? A couple of billion or something?
Clark hates to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big number.
Everybody just guesses.
Yeah.
But it has been pegged at about $1 billion.
About $1 billion. So I'm not sure that we really understand what it means that you put the jazz in a trust. Can you explain what that is and why you did that?
Well, let me put it a little bit in perspective. We paid $22 million for the Jazz in 1986. We completed the second half purchase. Total bill at that time was $22 million. We did not buy the Jazz to sell it or use it as an investment to make money. So we put that out of our minds and said, this is an asset to the state, and it will provide a lot of good, not only economically, but it will provide entertainment, it will bring us together, it will be an ambassador for the church. Worldwide, when people, in fact, Larry was told this by President Hinckley, and a lot of you will understand this, he went to talk to him about whether he should buy the Jazz or not. President Hinckley was a very astute businessman. And he said, after he listened to it, he said, there are some things you need to know before you make this purchase. He said, number one, if you do it, you will live life in a fishbowl. Your lives will be out there. Everybody will be watching. You'll never have another time where you'll be private. The first one was you have to do it as a good business deal. Mm-hmm. Don't put your life or your family in jeopardy. Then you'll be in a fishbowl. Number three, it will be very, very, very good for the church if you buy the Utah Jazz. And Larry said, well, why? Well, what would that do? And he said, all over the world, the Utah scores, the Jazz scores are reported, and it says Utah Jazz. Most people, when they hear Utah, think Mormons, mm-hmm. and it will be a missionary tool for the church. That's proved to be very true. And then President Hinckley said, in fact, in years to come, you'll be able to come back and tell me why that's true. Mm-hmm. And we've been able to do that many times. So buying the Jazz was not, we didn't buy it as an investment to make money. It just happened that over the time that we've owned it, which is 33 years, it has escalated in price because the value of people wanting a professional team, and there are only 30 of them, has gone up. And there have been some crazy owners that have paid high prices. So it now is worth a lot more money. But we didn't ever hang our hat on what it was worth. It was monetarily, it was what is it worth in value to the community, to the people here. So putting it in a trust was not a hard decision in reality. It was a result of people not believing that we weren't going to sell it. And it's also a good tax, a good estate planning program. But people would say, well, as soon as we have a losing year, they're going to sell it and take the money and run. We never intended to do that. This now, I hope, has put all of the naysayers to bed that we have got the Jazz here to stay. Because it's in a trust, it will not be sold.
Yeah, exactly. And the covenants of the trust are that it is to stay here in Utah, is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think you heard from the audience how we feel about that. It is wonderful to have, in this world of red and blue, and we're blue, and other guys down south are red, and not just politically. It's nice to have one thing that unites the entire community.
And it
certainly
does.
The Jazz has done that.
I like to tell the story about when we were in the playoffs. Dee Dee Corradini was the mayor.
Yeah.
She called Larry the next morning after one of the games and said, Larry, I have to tell you, there was not one call to the police department last night during the game. So everybody was watching the game.
Yeah, even the criminals.
Right. So it's a unifier.
Just the way you told this story just now, it's clear, Gail, that your faith is very important to you. And it comes out as you read this book. I want to go back to the theme of courage for just a moment. Can you talk a little bit about the courage you think it takes to live your faith, or how it has played out for you in your life?
I can do that. I want to start with the idea that I was born and raised in the LDS faith, or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and was taught, I had a very strong foundation. During my teenage years, I drifted, and I was not active. I was dating, I was working, it came at a time where you transition from young women into Relief Society, and I was quite athletic. I loved playing ball. We always had girls' sports teams. The Relief Society didn't have one. So I felt like there was really nothing there for me. I wasn't ready to go quilt, and I wasn't going to do all that stuff that the older ladies did. So I got busy with dating and working and finding other things to do, and then I got married, and it took several years. In fact, we had moved from Salt Lake to Colorado to play softball, and when we left, we were not active, so when we moved to Colorado, nobody knew we were there, so we were kind of in limbo and hiding from the church until one day my oldest son said to me, "Mommy, where does God live?" And then I thought, oh my goodness, I am a mother. I am not providing any kind of a spiritual foundation for my boys. I had 2 boys at the time. And I better get busy. This is important. It was important to me. It has to be important. I think we all need a higher power to lean on at some point, no matter what you choose. So I decided to find the primary, the ward. I called all the wards in our area and found one and took the kids to primary. And little by little, we got more engaged in what was going on in the ward and reactivated. And so we were in Colorado for 8.5 years. During that time, it was easy for me because I was home with the kids. I had the time. Larry was working, and he wasn't that interested because on weekends he played softball. And
he was a pitcher, I think.
He was a pitcher, very
fast
good.
pitch softball.
Yeah, very good. So it took him a little longer, but we had a great bishop and wonderful home teachers and good visiting teachers. And by the time we came back to Utah in 1979, we then were prepared to go to the temple. And in 1980, on our 15th wedding anniversary, we were sealed with our 5 children.
Yeah.
So that, I think that, to tell the story takes a lot of courage because I know there are non-LDS people in the audience, but to me, that's my life, and it's very important.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I think you said to me was that you and Larry used to go down to BYU and teach a class called the Entrepreneurial Perspective. And you always had, as you say in your book, you always had your own lecture, which was called "What is it like to be married to an entrepreneur?" And Larry's counsel to you was just tell it like it is. Just say it like it is.
Yep.
And
now remember, this is a 3-hour class. And the students brought their better half with them. So it was not just the student, but it was the spouse. And I spent the whole 3 hours talking about what it was like to be married to Larry, because he was a true blue entrepreneur, and it was not easy. It was very hard to be married to an entrepreneur because the way our lives were, he was invested in work, I was invested in the home and family. And the two very seldom met unless I made an effort to take the kids to work, take him to dinner, take him back to work and go home, or go with him on weekends to his softball games. So being married to an entrepreneur, and you need to heed this, because if your spouse is looking forward to you being an entrepreneur, this is not a good way to do it. But you need to be aware that it does become very lonely. You don't have time together, you don't have common goals together, you don't have family experiences together unless you work really hard at it. And we did. So those sessions, and we did that for, a couple of years, once every semester. That was our first therapy.
Yeah, yeah.
Because he would listen to me and say, I didn't know it was like that. And it was good for him to hear it.
Yeah.
He was brave.
Well, yeah, especially in a public forum like that. Yeah. There are 2 issues that you mention in your book that I think are really at the core of entrepreneurship, and they're also at the core of a good family marriage and partnership. And one of them is money, and the other is hard work. And you've tried to instill certain lessons in your own children about the principles of hard work and also the principles about money. What would you like our students to know about money and about hard work?
I think the first thing that I think is important for you to know about money is money should never drive you. It should not be the focus of all your efforts. There is opportunity to get rich as an entrepreneur, but that should not be the driving force. The hard work is much more important than money. Money will come, but along the way, you have to be conscious about what it's doing to you, because money can be a couple of things. It can be really richly rewarding if you use it right and you do good things with it, or it can be so debilitating that you become a slave to it, and that becomes the thing that you seek, and it's all important to you, and it really isn't. There is no heart in money. And so it's what you do with it that's important. And that's why, for us, getting to a point where we could do things with our money to help other people became so important. It wasn't having it, it was what can we do with it.
I guess I would really like to ask you this question, and I think we're getting to the point where I want to open it up for the audience to ask some questions. But you've talked about how hard Larry was working when you and he were starting out in Colorado, and you were also working.
I didn't work outside.
You didn't work outside the home. So that was before you had the kids, is that right?
That was before we moved to Colorado.
Before you moved to Colorado, okay. So you took care of the household, you were raising the kids, and you were trying to support Larry while he was trying to figure out, as you say, what he was good at and how he could build his career. The question I've got for you is, have you ever had to work harder as an executive than you did as a young mother trying to balance all those competing demands?
Well, the answer is yes and no.
Okay.
I look at it two ways. I have really, really good people in our company. We have been very fortunate to hire and retain exceptional people that are loyal to us, and we're loyal to them. We provide good jobs, an opportunity for advancement, the ability to support families, and exciting things to do. We have a broad range of employment opportunities, from sports and entertainment to automotive and a lot in between. But there was the aspect of being a woman and never having worked in the business. Those two things have been a little difficult to overcome. And some of it's come from my own family in that, oh, Mom, you've never worked in the company. You don't understand this, or you don't understand that. And not giving me credit for what I do understand or the common sense that I have. So that's been difficult. Not being the one who actually runs the business, but who directs it. I really wear two hats in the company. One is owner, and one is chairman of the board. Mm-hmm. And they're very different, but they go together in me. They don't always go together in a company, but I wear both hats. And so by right of my ownership and probably chairmanship, I deserve the respect of those in the company who run it and take care of it, but I think it's still difficult for them to see me as their leader, their owner, their equal, because I've never had the actual experience of running a business.
You know, you were anticipating in your answer the follow-up question that I had, which was, down at BYU, you were teaching a course of what it's like to be married to an entrepreneur. You are now the boss. You are the owner. You are the chairman. You are the entrepreneurial leader. And I don't know, I guess we could ask Kim what's it like to be married to an entrepreneur.
Highly recommend.
Kim said he highly recommends it. But it's a completely different place. And actually, Gail, you are in an extraordinary position, and I'm asking this now on behalf of all of the women in the room. What is it like as a woman in that kind of a role, and what special challenges arise for you as a as a woman entrepreneurial leader?
This is one of those unexpected journeys that I didn't ever see myself in, but decided not to shy away from. Some of the surprises that I've had is that this, interestingly enough, is a time for women. Women have more opportunity right now to excel in business than I think they've ever had. There are women's groups of all kinds everywhere, and they're trying to make opportunity for women be number one in their spheres, and not only in business, but in politics and in other leadership areas. And in fact, we've created a women's group in our company so that women can see the whole spectrum of opportunity for them in our company and have advancement as far as they want to go, which is a great thing. There are still a lot of obstacles that women have to overcome. I think diversity is a big issue today, not only with women, but with ethnic and just opportunity. And we're working very hard on equalizing that field. For me, one of the things that I have not really been able to get my arms around is that I am now a role model. Mm-hmm. I didn't seek to be a role model. I didn't set out to be one, but I understand the importance of it.
And the reality that you are.
Yeah.
Whether you wanted to be or not.
Right. And so I want to be the best role model I can be. And if I have opportunity to talk with young women or students who are seeking business opportunities, I want to be there for them. I want to be able to tell them how it's been for me and what they have to look forward to. And I think the future is bright for women.
Thank you. Let's open it up to the audience now and give our students an opportunity to ask some questions. We've got a microphone here that we can pass around. Do you guys want to find someone? And
do you want us to just stand up?
It looks like we've got one already back here. And then, yes, would like to get your question too.
Hello, my name is Michael Boutner. I'm from Salt Lake City, and I'm a marketing major and an entrepreneurship minor. This has been an amazing year for the Jazz. The whole NBA is captured by storm with Donovan Mitchell. What does that mean for the Utah Jazz going forward? What opportunities does that open up for the Utah Jazz?
I hope it's our time. It's nice to get a player who has taken the league by storm and who is so real and so refreshing and so talented, and I'm hoping that can be a catalyst. I know it is already, but I think if we're lucky and we work hard and we use our resources, and we are dumping all kinds of resources into the Utah Jazz so that they can win a championship, it might just be the beginning of that run for a championship.
Thank you.
Raise your hands high so that our person who's got our microphone can get it to you. Have you got one? Yeah, great, thanks.
Hi, my name's Logan, just like the city. First, I want to express my appreciation for all you've done for the state of Utah.
Thank you.
I know it's a different place because of you and your family. And so on that note, my question is, as we graduate, as we get into our big boy and big girl jobs, how can we make an impact on the community like you have?
That's a really good question, and I'm grateful that you asked it. I think if people feel and think that way, they'll make a difference. It's wanting to, and it's looking at your opportunities and using your resources wisely that will make a difference. I think it doesn't happen by chance, and so if you have that idea and that focus, go for it. Thank you.
We have a question in the front row right here.
Hi, my name is Megan Barchi. I'm doing a double major in business admin and marketing. My question for you is, earlier you were talking about being a role model to the citizens. What was the moment or the point in time where that really struck you and led you to that realization that you're not just a role model to your kids as a mother, but to the citizens and the people of Utah?
I think it happened the day we had the press release about Larry's death. And I sat at the podium and I was thinking about what happens from here and how do I go on, having been with this man for almost 50 years and live a life that I designed. And I realized that there's no way to extricate myself from what I've already done. And if I wanted to continue the legacy, that I had to step out there and I had to put myself in a position where I could be influential in the things that we were doing, because I knew how Larry had done it, and it doesn't happen without a lot of effort. Thank you.
You touched on this a little bit earlier, but I recall reading in your late husband's autobiography that his biggest regret after building all the businesses was not being there more for your family and for your kids. He talked about not being there for parent-teacher conferences and sporting events. And so we all obviously here hope to be successful in business, but can you talk a little bit more about how we can do that but also still have time and be there for our families?
Well, he used to say, I realize now that I could have done everything I did and still had time for my family. He was a workaholic. He stayed until I called him and said it's time to come home, actually. But he wanted to make sure every last message was answered and every letter was written. I used to tell my boys when they would say, I don't want to be like Dad. I don't want to be married to my work like Dad has been. I would say to them, you have two chances at fatherhood. One is the one you get that you have no control over. The other one is the father you'll be, which you have all the control over in the world. Decide what you want to be and then be it. And everything else will get done. So I think being a father really is your first priority. That's the eternal principle. Business will go on without you, as been proven with Larry being gone. Business went on without him.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of males raise their hand, but I'd love to see a few more women raise their hands too. So don't be shy, you women out there with your questions. There's one right over. There's one. Okay, good. Great.
Hi, my name is Brooke Gunnell. I'm a finance and accounting major. So you talked briefly about how you had a lot of opportunities come up for your business the longer you've been a part of it. But I'm curious, did you find any commonalities about those opportunities and how they came up?
I'm not sure I understand your question. When you say commonalities in the opportunities, do you mean, do things come to you because you already have some of that?
Yeah, more like, how did you find the opportunities? Were they given to you? Was it through the relationships that you had because of your position in your business?
Good question. In the beginning, it mostly happened because of our reputation. We ran our company very well with integrity and responsibility and financially responsible. And other people would take notice, and when they'd sell a dealership, they'd say, I want someone like that to own my company because I've invested all these years in it. I don't want it to get lost. So in the beginning, that was the case. Then as we developed the business, we realized there were things we needed to have that we didn't have access to. So we created some companies, like a subprime finance company and insurance companies, that if we ran them, it'd be easier for us to develop than to go out and use someone else, and the profit would stay in our company. So some of it was by people asking us, some of it was through developing our own businesses, and then others, for instance, when we did theaters, that one was just kind of a fluke because there was a piece of property in Sandy, Utah that had a high school on it named Jordan High School. Sandy was going to build a new high school, so they said to Larry, we've got this piece of property, would you be interested in putting a dealership there? And all of our dealerships were in Murray, and we didn't want to go down to Sandy, so he said, well, I'd be happy to help you out, but I don't think we want to put a dealership there. How about a nice green space for Sandy? And they said, no, we don't want any green space. We want a revenue-generating space. So he got his architects and his brain trust together and decided that in that space we could build an office tower and a theater complex. So he started building the complex, and about halfway through he said, "Wonder how you get movies." You don't just build a theater and call the movie company and say, "Send me movies." You have to create a relationship with them and develop that trust that you're going to present and represent them well. So we called Paramount, and they said, "We'll come and see what you have." We developed a relationship with them and got the movies. So that one was just happened. And then from there, we now have over 200 screens up and down the Wasatch Front. So it's been a really good business for us.
Over here, I think we've got a question. Yeah.
Yeah, hi, my name is Jolie, and I am a dual major in business admin and marketing, and I'm actually co-president of our Women in Business club here on campus. So I was wondering, you talked about the vision and the importance of vision in being an entrepreneur and building these companies, and that, at first you seem to see that it was Larry's vision, and how have you kind of taken that upon yourself, marrying his vision with what you now see for the company, and how was that starting the company, having his vision, and do you ever wish that you were more involved when the companies first started?
Absolutely. I do wish I had listened better. But I think I got enough to help me do what I do today. I think today our vision is what's next. I think right now in the world and in our businesses especially, things are changing so fast that we have to be aware of what's coming next and how can we be ready for it. And if we just stay with what we have, will we be okay, or do we need to diversify? So there are a lot of questions that have to be asked today that weren't necessarily important in Larry's time, that we're working on and we're looking at. I mean, you hear all the time about electric cars and autonomous cars. Well, we don't have any of those. What is the car business going to be like, and how are we going to be prepared for changes? These are things that a board of directors can help us with. Our own people are exploring the ideas. We're looking at things that we could get into that are not related to automotive or sports. It's just, it's a big field and a lot of important things to look at. So that's my vision, is what is it that we're going to be dealing with in the future?
We only have time for one more question, and so I'm going to take the privilege of asking that question.
Okay.
What is it, Gail, that if you could go back and tell your 21-year-old person when you were 21, what would you say to the Gail Miller at age 21, based on what you know at your current age?
That's such an insightful question. I would say, wow. Never thought you'd do that. Although I was raised with the idea that I was smart and I was strong and I was capable, and I always believed that I could do anything I wanted, in spite of some of the things that I went through that caused me to withdraw. I always had that core confidence. And so I really don't think that 21-year-old would be so surprised at what I am today. Well, we're deeply appreciative that you came and spent this hour with us, Gail. Thank you so much for your involvement with us, and we hope you stay involved. Thank you. You will.